Hey guys, Jeff Francoeur here. Thanks for listening to our content, and please like and subscribe. Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I'm Jeff Francoeur along with Britt and Brad. And usually we start by me introducing who's coming on, but, and for good reason, guys, no offense.
You're a pro.
No offense, I've done it. But today, I know this one hits home a little personal for you. So, Britt, I'm actually going to turn over the microphone to you today.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm honored. So this one does hit home for me. And our guest today is, it has been a big part of one of my son's stories. I've talked about Jack. Jack had about 4 major injuries in about 3.5 years. And our guest today, Dr. Neeru Jayanthi, was his doctor through all of those injuries. And I just got to say, he was an unbelievable practitioner, first of all, which we needed. But on top of that, was just a tremendous resource for us as a guide, as a counselor, giving us advice about different directions that we could go in at a time that was, pretty scary for Jack, who's had dreams and thought they were over. And so I'm super excited about having Dr. J here today with us. Before we bring him on, I want to share a few things about his background and some credentials, because folks, I got to tell you, we don't have just some random doctor on with us today. We've got a world-renowned expert in the areas that we're going to talk about today, which we're going to be talking about specialization and the physical impact on kids of specialization. We're going to be talking about injury prevention. And Dr. Jayanthi is an orthopedic doctor. He's a director of sports medicine and research at Emory. He's got, just all kinds of accolades as part of his bio, but he's a board member of the American Medical Society of Sports Medicine. He has worked with a number of different teams, the Atlanta Braves, Georgia Tech. He's worked with NFL combines, with MLB combines, and, world tennis tours, both on the men's side and the women's side. But beyond all that, he is highly published, and he's a great speaker all over the world on these topics that we're going to talk about today. He's been on HBO Real Sports. He's been on ESPN. He's been on every major news network. And we are fortunate enough to have him in studio with us today. So with all that said, let me welcome Dr. Neeru Jayanthi here to Pure Athlete.
Well, thanks so much. I don't know what to say. I'm sweating here, but I think maybe the most important thing is you might have forgotten I'm a dad.
That's what I was
two young boys, and I coach them. I think that's the biggest credential.
You're going through it.
This guy goes through everything, man. Does a great job, and you forget that he's a dad.
Yeah,
no, you're good. No,
I'd get dinged on something.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, I appreciate it.
Dr. J, thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely. This is like you guys. I'm so impressed with what you guys are doing at Pure Athlete, and I'm all in. I'm all in to help out in any way I can. So it's an honor to be here.
Well, we are excited about you being here, and we want to dive right in because there's a whole bunch of stuff that we want to cover that we think is going to be very relevant to our audience. But just for starters, can you kind of tell us a little bit about how you got into this area of research and why you're so passionate about it and why it should matter so much to our audience?
Yeah, actually, you guys would be interested because I'd never actually told you either, but it was probably about maybe 15, 20 years ago. We started looking at, I have a big tennis background, and we started researching youth tennis players and wondering, why are they getting hurt and dropping out of tournaments and all these kind of things. We looked at about 500 youth tennis players and found a couple of, for research purposes, soft findings that if you trained only in tennis, which most of them did, you were more likely to get injured, and we were probably the first people to report that. So it got some publicity in the media, but it actually happened to be coming out at the same time as this book called Open came out, which is Andre Agassi's story of getting really drilled into tennis so early and young and all the negative things that happen, and probably to a lot of other young athletes. So it just kind of took off from there, and people were extrapolating to every other sport. They're like, wow, maybe you shouldn't specialize and play only one sport. And so it created some awareness. And then, but I'm a researcher and a sports physician. I said, well, we don't have the data on that. So then I said, we got to follow all the sports. So we were the first probably group to follow about 1,200 youth athletes over 3 years and look at their injury patterns and whether they specialize or not, and publish on it and really get that information out there. So and then I don't know if you know Aspen Institute Project Play, but Tom Ferry actually contacted me, saw some of the data, and I was in the sports medicine world, and it's like, you think about like exactly like the Braves and NFL and MLB and all these things, and everyone's, I was a team physician at D1 school and at Loyola, and he brought me out. He was really interested in what's happening with youth athletes, and there's this whole, their mission, and similar to yours, is to try to change the culture of youth sports, and that was my eye-opening experience. I said, wait, what is? I kind of changed my mission at that, like on a dime. I said, wow, people are actually paying attention to this data and research, and so then I had to research more because everyone kept asking me, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And 15 years later, I can't stop. Like, it's, people need it. And, every time I meet more people like you guys saying we need more data, and parents and coaches, I'm not smart enough guy like the other doctors in the world who do all this fancy stuff, teach all the doctors. I actually do research to teach parents and coaches. That's, my rules are really translatable to, to regular folks. So, yeah. And then now with 2 kids of my own, I mean, it all matters. Yeah. It all matters to me a lot.
A few years back, you did a thing on HBO Real Sports, and can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because obviously, a lot of what you were talking about was the injury epidemic that's going on in youth sports that you're talking about.
Yeah, so basically that came about obviously because Real Sports, as you guys know, is identifying what I call public health problems, right? What's actually happening that affects it. So if you look at the big picture, there's 60 million kids who play youth sports. If you look at our data, about 1/3 of them will choose only a single sport to specialize in. So we're talking about 20 million kids at least who are at risk for some of these things we're going to talk about. And so Real Sports obviously is a great enterprise, and they really highlight it well. They highlight some of the really bad things. So there's the individual injury risk, which we'll talk about. And hey, look, you guys played at high levels, Jeff. You know a little bit about baseball, I guess, and you can get hurt, but the bigger issue is kids that have to leave sport because of that, and that's a big problem. And then the kids, because of this system, who never get a chance in the sport. So you get the haves and have-nots. So you got kids who are elite level, all the resources go into that, but then it's like 90% of the other kids are kind of pushed aside. And so I think, this is a public health issue. This is about our children who play sport, and there's 60 million of them that we're talking about. So this is, honestly, it's much bigger than Major League Baseball, NFL, everything else combined as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Dr. J, so this is the recent occurrence. So what are some of the injuries that doctors started noticing in the past 5-6 years for youth athletes that they had noticed in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say recent by about 20 years or so is what we're looking at. And so about at least over the last 20 years, the data shift in my mind has been an acceleration by about 4 years of the types of injuries. So we're pushing kids earlier by about 4 years. And this is kind of looking at the ages of specialization, like when you only choose one sport and when you're intensifying, which right now is maybe in a lot of sports around between 10 and 12 years old. Okay. So, and it happens in my practice, and I won't talk about specifics, but Britt has seen it with his kid. We see things that I used to see in college and professional athletes, like a simple thing, a patellar tendon problem, which you just get low grade problems and you're like, hey, you just rest and do this little rehab and you're back. Now we see advanced changes that are happening to like tendons, lumbar spine, stress fractures, and other things that are happening about 4 years earlier. And pathologies that I'm like, wow, we didn't used to see that. I'm doing injections and procedures, and I hate even mentioning this, on kids. I never want to do that stuff. But, things have accelerated. And that's where the concern is when we're accelerating, because we need to look at what happens later in life.
So you're saying the age of this is like 10 to 12 that you're saying?
Well, we see everyone. I mean, I see 8-year-olds.
No, but I'm saying that's what, like, it's accelerating to that age.
So I think that our intensification, and when I say our sports community intensification of sport is happening around 10 or 12 years old, right? And that's about 4 years earlier than what we had previously seen and what we previously recommended. I think all of us here are old enough to say, look, we played sports for fun, and we played everything. And then when you got really good at it in high school, maybe
got serious.
those days are long gone, right? You didn't have a chance to make a high school team if you start in high school, right? So as a result of that, we've accelerated our injury type, not just injury rate, but the injury type that we're seeing. And stress injury, we shouldn't be really seeing in these kids. They're just, there isn't a break that we used to have.
Well, and I've seen you talk about, and I've also experienced it with my son, that you're dealing with patients who are about to go to college and they're broken before they even get to college, which is when it's really supposed to intensify.
Yeah, that's the ESPN line that like you talk to them, you do a whole piece, and then that's the line that probably got the most attention. And it's true actually, and you know this. I mean, if I'm allowed to share,
yeah, sure,
we're just trying to patch them up so that they can get to college. I'm a college team physician as well too, so I see it, and it's very rare for someone to come into college athletics right now who's completely healthy, and so we're basically just trying to patch them up and trying to get them to that point, which previously was like that would be your intense period, right? But
that's where you peak.
Yeah, where you
start
peak,
to go through that,
peak, right?
Yeah.
Or late high school, you should peak, right? And then you really, but no, we're peaking way earlier, like at least 4 years earlier.
Wow.
And then we're getting kids to exit, or if they do, I mean, I don't want to be Debbie Downer. Let's start, and this is a really important message. We all love sports.
Yep.
Okay.
We want kids to play sports. So I don't want messaging that says if you play sports, you're going to get hurt and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just about getting the right environment. I think we're trying to help educate people to get your right environment, and that's the struggle. And so and that's why with Jack, I have to go on court. I have to be around them because I have to create the environment so we can get him healthy. I can do all that. You can treat him and do whatever I have to do on the medical side, but then you send him off to the wild, right? And then now you have no control over the environment. That's their schedules, the coaching, the competition, and so that's what you guys are trying to help do, is educate parents and hopefully administrators and coaches and everything about creating the best environment. And I'm all in for whatever you guys are going to do. We have some work.
Yeah, so let's get off to this point here, because we were talking before we came on. I'm a multi-sport guy. A lot of the athletes we've had on played numerous sports up until high school, but say there is a 12-year-old kid out there and the parents listening and they say, my son is meant, or my daughter is meant to play tennis. Okay. And they want to specialize in it. That's their ability.
Yeah.
If their kid wants to do it. So now does it come down to load management, making sure you're not out there playing every single day, taking weeks off at a time? I'm guessing that's where you have to go if that's the route you're going to take.
You're exactly right. So I can't look, and I treat and take care of athletes from every sport, but I can't go on a ledge and say you should only play. I mean, you got to play a lot of sports. You're going to do tennis, right? I mean, I do USTA webinars, and we have tons of parents in there. So we wrote a paper called "How Do You Train a Highly Specialized Athlete?" And so it's exactly that. So what you need to do then is, if you're going to take the risk, which is okay, of saying, I want to specialize.
Yeah.
If the child does, we have a couple studies that if you have good supportive parents and you have a right path and good coach, you can do it, right? But it's exactly that. You have to look at your year. You have to look at your calendar. When you want to peak throughout the year, you have to pick out your rest periods. We have all these rules. Try to train less hours per week than your age, and try to introduce some free play, or at least if it's not another sport, movement patterns that are not just that same sport off court. Get at least 2 months where you're not competing throughout the year. It doesn't have to be consecutive. And so if we, and build strength and change it through different stages of development. When you're like in your peak height velocity, you go through adolescent awkwardness. That's the wrong time to ramp up a lot, right? And so that's where you focus on your strength and less movement patterns and more strength and coordination. And so if you can follow those and have supportive families, you can be successful. And I tell them that it just takes a lot more work, and you have to have my business card because your risk is a little bit higher to get hurt, but I'm okay with it. And so, but unfortunately, most people can't or aren't aware, like you guys have mentioned, of those things. And again, the environment doesn't let you do that. So you can say that, but unfortunately, the tennis environment, you got to play 20 tournaments a year to get national ranking.
Yeah. Well, even in other sports, I mean, let's talk about, you have a lot of data around early specialization versus post-puberty specialization. So what does the data say? Because, I mean, we have baseball players who are playing, 8U, 9U baseball, and they're playing 100 games a year and pitching all kind of innings, soccer, you name it. So what is your data saying about that?
Well, we have one systematic review that looked at, a systematic review is a compilation of all of the studies that are out there. So there isn't one single study that is out there that shows that there's an advantage to choosing only one sport versus multiple sports as far as performance, even up to the elite level, like Olympic level. And
there's not one?
There's not even one out of the 19. So 0 out of 19, right?
Wow.
In a systematic review. But it's
Wait,
not
wait,
to say.
Say that again. Say that again.
So there isn't one study that shows an advantage to specializing in a single sport and getting higher level performance. Now, equal may be possible.
Can I tell that guy that sent that Bryce Harper email? There you go, pal.
Yeah. Now,
you might have just lost a follower.
Right. You lost one follower. You'll get at least a couple more. Right. But it's not to say you can't be successful. And I'm allowed to share one slide because we looked at WTA data. There's professional. So there's about half them specialize young and half them specialize later. They end up with the same ranking. So your path can be similar. You can still be successful by doing this, right? If you choose to specialize, you just have more risk. That you have to accept that. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to probably get hurt more. We're about ready to submit 2 more papers. In fact, females get the bigger risk, but you have more likelihood to get hurt more, and you have more likely to get more serious overuse injuries that keep you out for 1 month or longer, and various others. So you have to accept that.
And females have a higher risk?
And females are bigger risk.
Really?
Right? And attrition is a bigger risk too. So you also look at 5-year outcome studies that you just have to accept that you have a bigger risk of your kid quitting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So you have to decide so I don't want to take that risk. It would kill me if my kids quit sport. I'd much rather them, if they don't feel like it, we just say, you want to go to practice today? You'd rather watch a movie? I'm like, great, we'll miss practice.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like we let them kind of have some say in the matter.
Especially at, like you said, your kids' age.
Younger.
Yeah.
10 and 8, like you get to 16, you're trying to do that. Well, we might have.
No.
You're on the varsity baseball team.
I agree.
Exactly.
When you're at a young age that. And I
Right.
think that's why, and we talk about it a lot, the parents, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it gets to where the kid doesn't even want to do it anymore because it's not fun. You're forcing it on them.
Right.
Dr. J, you talked about the difference in the gender injuries. Can you like, what's a specific injury that a female athlete will have versus kind of a male athlete? Is there predominant ones either way?
Well, the one by far is overuse and overtraining. We're just, and so we haven't we just submitted for publication. Usually in the medical world, you're not supposed to talk about it, but I'll throw it out there. I don't think a lot of people are publishing journals. Hello, you guys are publishing, email me and love to collaborate. Okay. But simply put, is one is sport type, right? So, and the other thing we're seeing is that they actually do almost no free play. So free play is doing things without any coaches or things for fun. Girls do almost none of that. So they may have similar training and all the other stuff, but they're not doing anything else besides just their sport.
No pickup
and
games.
Individual. I mean, when was the last time you saw a bunch of girls going out and playing sports for fun? And so and so we think actually free play is protective. I will tell you one thing we did publish, which is really cool. We looked at socioeconomic status. So kids who come from families with money and versus kids who are public aided, and this was when I was in Chicago, who didn't have as much money. And so the kids who didn't have as much money actually played more sports weekly, like 20 hours a week, but a much more of it was for fun, free play. And the kids who were coming with money, you know that because I think your son's in that article, they ended up having more serious overuse injuries, even though they had less total hours of physical activity. Most of it was organized. So it's actually okay. Like we want kids to play sport. So you go pick up basketball with your buddies for 3 hours. You're like, you know what? My knee's a little sore. You just say, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go home and ride my bike home. So it's self-regulated. No coach is telling you to got to do this, and so that's actually, I think we're seeing as one of the critical differences.
So I'm going to pull a Brit here. I want you to repeat that again. Free play, they're actually getting more hours of sport.
Yeah.
And they're getting less injuries.
Yeah.
And they're also probably having more fun.
When they get tired, they say, I'm tired.
They
I'm
can
done.
Self-regulated, yeah. And we're actually saying the term, and we published and we said it. We think it's protective of injury.
Yeah.
We think playing for fun, playing on your own terms. And so it's child-led play versus adult-led play, right? And you're right. Look, I'm not telling some 15-year-old to skip their team or travel
for sure.
practice.
Yep.
But let's complement all this high-intense stuff with times where you can just play for fun.
Absolutely.
And there's something to say about it. And in the end goal of it all, very few. I'm like, my goal is I want these kids to be doing sports when they're adults, right? So they need to be playing for, doing something when they're adults. It's for health and everything. So we need to build a community of people who are going to do that. And that's 99% of these kids. That's what we want them to do when they're all done, right?
I would think the specialization thing too is like you said, you try to set these parameters, take this week off, do this. I think the tough thing with that is telling a kid you can't hit a tennis ball for 2 weeks, or you got to take some time off. And I just think that's why it's so important to have other sports, other outlets, other things to do, because I think back to myself, I played football all fall and late into through December. I didn't throw a baseball for 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I didn't play football and it was just baseball, my dad told me, well, we're not going to throw for a month. I guarantee you at some point I would have gone out there and thrown.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're bored, you want something to
Absolutely.
do. And I think that's the biggest thing for me when you talk about specialization. Like that is, like you said, obviously the injury, but you're only doing one thing, and you're going to want to do that. If it's 75 degrees outside, you want to go outside. And if you're not doing anything else, you're going to go to what you know.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing. Whereas you talk about the other sports, and I'm sure you know this with baseball, football for quarterbacks, guys that get done with the football season, and then they're right into passing camps in January and February. Like you're gonna break down at some point.
Yeah.
You cannot do it forever.
Yeah. So you asked about the other thing is year-round training thing. That's what girls are more likely than boys to do, is the year-round training. Because I think it's exactly what you said, because they don't have anything else. And I wish girls had more opportunities to do other sport activities.
Yeah.
Boys have a few more opportunities. That's they have, they can get a bunch of. So I agree with you. Boys will go nuts. That's why actually when kids get hurt, like for tennis players, I go on court with them because I know you got to figure out anything they can do that just at least keeps them doing something. They'll go nuts.
Active, yeah.
So yeah, totally with you on that. And it's just taking your foot off the pedal. And I agree. You also can't just tell them you have to do this, have to do that. Like we're about to start a counseling research trial, and it's a bunch of the basic rules I just kind of gave you about training, but you got to supplement with something else. So if you're off, your recovery isn't like it. Just don't compete in tennis tournaments like for 2 months of the year. If you want to go and hit, like I hit with my kids, you want to go do something for fun with no coaches and knock yourself out. Go do something else, but you got to exercise.
But when it becomes training and drills and everything, I agree. I love the word free play.
Yeah.
I haven't even thought of that when we're talking, because I love watching out my backyard and seeing my son and his three buddies playing football in the backyard. It's great. They don't need me.
You were telling us about something that your wife is doing.
Yeah, and if it's okay if I can.
Yeah, sure.
So free play, the other thing about free play is you can, play, but it's actually free. It doesn't cost any money. Okay. The other thing
Sports
about
cost
free
money?
Forbid.
Yeah. So it's more than, so we have so I can tell you, I've spoken probably 200 times around the world on this stuff, and I speak to a lot of audiences that already agree with me. But if you want to make change, you got to do things like this. You got to reach the people, what you guys are doing. So my wife, who has no sports background, she had two brothers. When she was in high school, she said, I don't ever want to be with a guy who likes sports. And then she married me. Okay. So then
I have one of those wives.
Yeah, right. So she started a mission-based business called Pick Up Sports, and she created an app to get kids to play for fun, bring back neighborhood play. So it's just got rolling. So she'll send a message on the app and say, hey, we're going to play pickup baseball. You don't have to bring anything. And 2:00 at the park. And a bunch of kids just show up. And then we're going to kind of expand that. Maybe have neighborhoods play neighborhoods and stuff. If you don't make it, no one cares. If you make it, great. If you have to leave a little early, no problem. And, and parents don't do anything. So we have to have a grown-up or parent around for safety these days. So it's good. And so we're trying to explore that, avenue to to just, what I say is right now there's no other options. And part of the reason I think that you get that, even my own kids, they're in baseball in this area, if I can say, and it's a lot of practices and a lot, is because you don't have another option.
Yeah.
Because what else do you do if you either sign up for that league or you don't play? And so if you have other options, I think that's where, if you can pull some of this to give them better options.
I agree. You think about recess. I was a couple weeks ago, drove by the school. I had lunch with my son and seeing, I was getting in my car and they were out at recess and they were playing 6-on-6, 7-on-7 football game out there. And it's like, they figure it out.
Oh yeah,
These kids
they
are
don't
smart
need, they don't
enough.
need
My
someone to
son's
organize it for them.
in third grade, but they know how to put 7-on-7 and let's play a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is so healthy.
Oh yeah. And they don't, and we all know this. They don't care ultimately if their team lost or won ultimately, as long as they got in,
Absolutely.
So you could be the smallest little runt out there. My kids are little and they're going to, it's going to, but if you're on the field, that's most important. Like I got on the field, someone threw a ball at me, whatever it is. And that's actually what it's way more about. And so I love that. And we just need to expand on that because unfortunately, as you see, there's recess, but that disappears. And in schools, gym is like, maybe one time a week, and it's crazy how. So and there's no funding, so it's going to happen outside of school, unfortunately. So that's why we have to come up with alternative solutions. Pick up sports is maybe one way, but hey, just getting parents to encourage their kids to just take a break and just call your friends and go play, ride your bike and go play with your friends.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to ask you something really specific. You just talked about your sons are short or on the shorter end.
Yeah.
I have sons on the shorter end.
Yeah.
It's your fault, Brett.
I know, they tell me all the time.
On,
this
Dad.
is a crazy question, but you're an expert in orthopedics and
Sports medicine,
growth plates
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all kinds
yeah.
of stuff like that we've talked about before. There are people out there who are looking into how do I help make my kid taller?
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible?
Yeah, well, one is choose different parents, and so make sure
Too late for that.
Marry Jeff Francoeur and you get in the jeans.
Yeah.
I'm not doing
number
that.
One, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
So second thing is nutrition, right? So that's about that's the biggest thing. So we actually are doing a thing. We actually there's some research that we actually calculate a percent of predicted adult height and categorize all our athletes, and we've done it about 1,000 athletes that we're publishing on it. It's actually a UK from Great Britain, and the kids and the parents are they don't even care about their injury. They're like, how tall am I going to be? That's the only thing they care about. So we do a predicted adult height. And obviously the biology of your parents plays a big role, but we're finding actually many of the kids are beating their parents. And I think a lot of that actually also comes down to nutrition. And we're trying to beat that in our own kids' heads because that's the difference, because I come from a country where a lot of people are shorter, but there's nutritional reasons why that happens. So I think during your formative years, I think that's where you can help yourself the most. But I will say from a success point of view, and this is the more UCLA study, the highest likelihood of getting a college athletic scholarship is based solely on having a first degree relative who has played college or professional sports. So if you have that in your genes, you're lucky. My kids aren't. I'm borderline. I was walking on a Big Ten school, so you're done.
You're done.
I was walking on a Big Ten school, so I'm kind of like a quandary here, but
By
you
far
have
been my
your
favorite
genetics.
episode.
Your genetics plays that huge role. So all you need is the environment, and the best athletes don't. That's why you don't push your kids, because you're like, it's cream. It's gonna end up, if they want to do it, it's gonna end up okay. So,
Dr. J, and I know this is more anecdotal than scientific, but you're kind of in the battlefield of this whole youth sports culture. And where are you seeing the pressure come from? Are you seeing it come from the coaches? You seeing it come from the parents? Like, where are you seeing the pressure that is making these kids like not only specialize but work on their sport for 11 months out of the year?
Yeah, you're gonna put me under the gun. How many followers do you guys have again?
Hopefully more after this.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll see. So, you should watch HBO Real Sports because they've had a couple of things on this. Let's at least it's everyone, okay? But one step of it is let's accept that there's a business in youth sports, okay? Let's just accept that, okay?
We've said that a few times.
Yeah, and it's part of it. It's not the only thing. And then there's parents who are aspirational. So if you look at the model, we've spoken about this. parent introduces child to sport. That's how a kid introduces sport, right? You know, you say like, we don't want our kids playing hockey because I don't want to be in the cold. Like we told them which sports, like, here, try this. Then when kid gets reasonably good, coach says your kid's good, they should do X, Y, or Z. So then parent hands it to coach. And then most parents will say, all right, what do you think we should do? And then the coach then may drive from there. That creates parent enthusiasm and kid enthusiasm. And so I think probably a lot of the direction right now of what to do is probably from coaching, right? And I'm not saying there's a lot of awesome coaches, a lot of them we work with in the community who really understand how to do this.
I know where you're going. There's some horrible coaches too.
But there's, but then there's a potential risk of the business, right? Of, and it's hard because you do have to support a business. So how do you do that? But, and then the business is now extended. It's not just your coaching business. Now there's facilities and travel teams and big mega centers to play. And so it's really expanded. I actually think that's not going to change, if you ask me honestly, or at least in the next 20 years. I don't think that's going to change because there's a lot of great experiences that can happen. And parents of those, they're like, I love it. Kids went here. And that's okay. And so we want that, but you just need alternatives. It can't just be that. But I think maybe that's the big, I don't know if you guys can have just as good of an opinion, but I think that's a big driver. Now, whether or not, one last thing I'll tell you is that, I call it long-term athlete development, short-term athlete development. So long-term is, we all want our kids to be good when they're in college or later and all that stuff. But actually, that's not good enough these days. Short-term athlete development works. Actually, there's data that supports if you want your kid to be really good by 12 or 14, guess what? Train a lot at 8 to 10, and you'll get really good by 12 to 14. We all know that it might push you out of the sport, get you injured, and other things, and a few of them will make it. But that's not necessarily what other kids, parents, they're like, okay, well, hey, my kid's really great at 12 or 14. That's good for me. And then if it happens to them, they kind of go, oh, well, it's, and they have to accept it, or it's too late, or they didn't realize. So short-term athlete development, unfortunately, does work. And so you're competing against that too.
Well, and that's parent driven. I mean, that's a parent feeling the pressure from, that they want their kid to be a great 12-year-old athlete, as opposed to thinking about, well, what are they going to be like when they're 17? And so, and that the kid's not sitting there going, they're not mature enough to think that way. A parent's the only one that's mature enough to think long-term versus short-term.
But some parents, I think, don't know. And, and that's what we're trying to do is provide information to those parents. You said at the very beginning, you said something about, pure athletes trying to change the youth culture you're working on. I mean, we've kind of concluded we're not going to change the culture, but we hope to influence it. And the way to influence it is to educate parents and coaches and on what works and what the long-term impact of what we're doing today is.
Yeah.
I got a quick question for you is speaking of like the height requirement and stuff, because I know for me, I was not allowed to touch a weight lifting until I was in 8th grade. And, I'm sure there's lots of parents out here with young boys, young girls. When is that right time? Because I do know that as I got lifting, it made a huge impact for me in football and baseball as I got stronger and grew. But my dad did not let me touch a weight till 8th grade.
Yeah. So actually, Avery Fagenbaum is basically he's a good friend of mine. He's written more books on pediatric resistance training than anyone probably in the world. He just spoke at our Emory conference this last year. Great guy. And strength training for kids does not change your injury risk or growth plate, stunt your growth, or do anything like that in supervised settings with appropriate, doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Right? And so the earlier you do it, the better. The benefits change when you add growth and testosterone, right? Because then you can build more skeletal hypertrophy and muscle mass. Yeah. But neuromuscular, what we call like your movement patterns, can really be corrected earlier. And so an example is boys are told, like when they jump around all that stuff, like I tell my boys they're jumping off the stairs. I don't tell them don't jump off the stairs. I say when you jump, I want you to land like this and kind of stick your butt out and
land
with your knees properly or whatever. And they go do that. And then so unfortunately we tell girls, oh no, be careful, don't. Oh my gosh, be careful. And so they don't develop those neuromuscular training patterns. And same thing if you learn how to squat without a bar and then you add a bar and then so it's actually okay in supervised settings to do strength training. And in fact, encouraged, we should be doing that. And so, but again, you have Jeff Francoeur genes, and so you could make up that difference. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to keep. Don't
Yeah.
keep stroking his ego.
So you
Don't
can
keep
make up
stroking
difference.
his
My
ego.
He
kids
doesn't
actually,
need it.
I got into
Guys,
some
I'm
of that
plenty
now.
mature enough to handle that.
Oh my gosh, I don't know about that.
You know, but
This
it
is taking a
funny,
bad
though.
turn.
Yeah. But it is funny because you talk about that though too, and I think as a parent though, you have to find the right balance, right? Because it's like if I went and told my 8-year-old son, you know, we're going to work out 4 days a week and to supervise, it'd be a disaster.
No. We're not talking about.
No, I know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm just
but
saying,
yeah, you
like,
don't want-
I think that's again where you find out a balance of
Yeah.
the age
do it the right
of,
way, yeah.
and letting your kids, you know, pick what they want to do.
Yeah, but supervised isn't meaning like, you know, Jimmy, who's a 14-year-old who's really experienced at weightlifting, can show you what, you know, how to bench and do free weights. That's not super.
Yeah, with one of my kids, it was always to get, especially all my kids, it was to make them, give them a challenge and make it a competition. Like how many push-ups can you do in a minute? How many sit-ups can you do in a minute?
Yeah.
You know, and then you go do it, come back in a couple weeks. Let's see if you beat your record or whatever. Where it's less supervised, but it's more, you're still getting them to do some body weight things and getting them to get into understanding kind of what strength resistance and stuff like that does.
James Blake actually did it with his kid, you know, and I started doing it. I didn't get very far, but I think he ended up doing his goal was to do 1,000 push-ups, but he had to work up towards that. And so and I was like, I started that with my kids, and then, you know, after about a week, I was like, damn, like that's, you know, I'm like, I'm waking up, I'm like, I don't know if I can
Talk
pull
about
it.
injury prevention.
Yeah, I don't know if I can pull
Good
this
for
one up.
long-term development.
Yes.
Hey, I want to ask you a real specific question about volume of training. And I know I've heard you talk about age appropriate volume. So what's a rule of thumb there?
So a rule of thumb, because it's been really interesting, I have to credit a good friend who passed, Ollie Stevens, who was a tennis teaching pro, and he died of leukemia. But 20 years ago, we were about to give a talk to parents, and I said, tennis parents, and I said, hey, what do you tell your kids? Like, how much should they train? He said, I just tell them to do less hours per week than their age. It's just really easy to remember. I was like, no way, that's a great idea. So I researched it in 1,200 athletes, and then it became, and I used to joke about it. I was like, it's not your rule anymore. I researched it, so it's published. It's my rule. And then, and it was actually very significant for increased risk of overuse injury and serious overuse injury. Now I'm more into like what stage of development we're doing this, right? So if you have 3 stages, the first one is pre-adolescent. So, like 12 and under, 10 and under, and all that kind of stuff. It's actually probably okay if you're playing for fun and doing a bunch of stuff. You're probably going to be okay. You don't get too many serious overuse injuries there. So a few will, and they get a little severs, this and that, and you can get by with that. Peak growth height, that's when you're more vulnerable. You got to be careful because you get some other stuff. And then you can intensify, and there's some that then you follow those rules a little more tightly during peak height. Then when you get to like you're skeletally mature, you either have the kids are going to go for it, and you just have to accept the risk. And sometimes, like you're 15, 16, 17, you're going to go for it. Then you might train more than that. And that's maybe acceptable if you're tolerant, we call it load tolerant. And we all know it. NBA, MLB, there's people who are load tolerant. There's some people who are like, I'm a relief pitcher. I can do 2 innings, and after that, my arm is done.
Yeah.
So everyone is different. So you have to individualize it then.
When is peak? Well, you keep saying like peak,
Height,
grown.
like,
When is what age group?
So,
what age is that?
great question. So girls start taking off at around 11 for their rapid growth or growth spurt. Basically, boys around 13, and takes 2 to 3 years to get through that. So girls by 13 or 14, most of them will have done a bunch of their growth. They may have a little bit left. And then by 15, 16, most boys will be done with about 96% of their growth.
So you're saying that's when the most of the overuse injuries will happen?
Well, wow, that's literally the manuscript we're publishing. And so there's a lot of debate, but let's just say that's when we're at risk for more, not just overuse, but the more worrisome one. So there's one difference. Like you get kneecap pain, patellofemoral pain, it's sore, and you just
Deal with it.
You deal with it, you go on, right? But a back stress injury is a serious, you're out for a while. And so we try to look at when those happen. And so that's like peak height velocity, like mid to late. So you gotta be careful in that rapid growth phase, and actually beyond a little bit.
I want to ask you, as we're kind of wrapping up here, because I know you got other things you got to go.
This is way more fun than going to work. How long do these podcasts last?
Just in general, I mean, talking to parents, a lot of our audience are parents. What's your advice? Because again, you've talked about you're a dad,
Yeah.
you're also an expert. How do we maintain balance in this culture?
Yeah, and look, I'm not perfect. I think I messed it up only twice with my older kid and only once with my younger kid. So, and that's pretty good. I think
Yeah.
but so one thing is listen to your kid. Okay, this has nothing to do with you. Just listen to your kid and find out what they want. And that's it. So, when you listen to your kid, my older kid, I want him to play sports, but he wants to be an actor, and that's cool. That's fine. Now we just want him to exercise, and he's like, take it or leave it, and that's totally fine. My younger kid's very competitive, and he takes it on, and so you have to listen to your kid and see where they want, and keep frequent check-ins.
Yeah.
And you have to check in, and it's not, so you sit down before each season, we say, I say, what do you want to do next season? Here are some options that we can do based on our family needs and everything. And you just keep doing that throughout, every 3 months or so. And I think if you do that, you listen to your kid, and there's going to be ups and downs. And sometimes you're like, I don't want to do this year. And you just go, great, then don't. I think, and then if we think about where you want your kid to be in 10 years, so the average is 8 to 18, right? So what do you want over the next 10 years? Then, my goal is I want to be able to exercise and play sports and do things with my kids throughout childhood and when they're adults. And so I think if you keep those goals there, and through that process, some will do great and be great athletes and really be successful, and some will be doing other things, and hopefully they're still playing sports. And hopefully that works.
Well, and I want to go back to kind of one of the first things you said in terms of they're peaking 4 years earlier than they should. And so if your child's dream is to play for their high school, tennis team or their high school basketball team, that it's unhealthy for them. They're not going to be at their best when they need to be at their best in high school. They're going to be hitting their peak 4 years before that if they specialize too much and they overtrain. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a real problem. We're in Johns Creek here, and a lot of parents have a lot of money to spend to get their kids there. And it's actually a very legitimate question for a parent to say, well, I'm not sure if my kid can make their high school team. And you're right. It's actually a real thing that they may not. And so you have to kind of take a step back and figure out what risk are you willing to take and when. So at 8 and 10, it seems a little silly, in my opinion, maybe to really go all in. 12, 13, maybe even though you follow, some risk. But at some point, you're going to have to, if you want to try to make it, you got to do something. But Jeff, you had asked before, what do you do when your kids specialize? Well, we do have some rules to help you with that. And that is some of the things we talked about, like your training, like your loads, and we call it avoid big spikes in your load, and then, have some free play, and just we published on it. Maybe I'll try to send it to you.
Yeah.
So try doing that as best you can in this environment, as best you can.
And that's why I hate specialization, because of the fact that you're putting all your eggs in this one basket. And what you're talking about, what if I can't make my high school team? My wife and I talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. Do you move? Do you transplant your whole house and go somewhere so your kid can play and maybe they don't make that team? If you enjoy and have the ability to play 2-3 sports, my guess is majority of the time, one of those sports, as you get going, you will be good enough, if you want to and you work at it, to make a high school sport. It might not be the one you set out at 10 years old that you wanted to make. I mean, you asked me, at 8 years old, my favorite sport was basketball, man. Right. I shot in the driveway all day. I wanted to be the next Michael Jordan. By the time I got to high school, I quit basketball after 9th grade and football and baseball. But my point is, I think the idea with specialization is you go all in and then it does not work out. I think the fall is so much harder because
you're talking early specialization.
Yeah. But what he's saying is all of a sudden you specialize everything at 10, 11, 12, and you get to high school and you can't make the team. I mean, the fall is huge, where if you've played 2 or 3 sports, now we get to high school. Maybe I can't make the football team at Johns Creek High School, but you know what? I can make the lacrosse team, and I can go have a great 4 years playing lacrosse.
Or worse yet, you're injured and you can't even participate.
Exactly, right?
Now, so I'll give you the devil's advocate on that, because that's a Jeff Francoeur genes talking, okay? Now, let's say, throw it out there, you're an Indian parent with not as great of genes, and you're like, how am I going to keep up with these other kids? I need to train more to do that, because that's the argument I hear. You got to train more to keep up with the Jeff Francoeur kids, because now they're not, they don't have as much of the genetic. So then what do you do? That's what they tell us. So
and
you got to,
my
if you're
art-
an average
and
kid.
you ready for
We
my
have this
argument?
argument.
You ready?
If you're an average, let me
Dr.
finish.
J,
If you're an
Britt and I have had this
average kid,
conversation.
if you're an average kid, I'm telling you this is what
you're
the
on the
parents tell me.
edge.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah,
sure.
They need to train more to keep up with them. So that's what they're telling me. So I'd love to hear what you would tell that family.
My thing to that is, and I think John Smoltz talked about this when he came on with his podcast, you're always going to have those 2 or 3 kids at every school and any sport that are just head and shoulders better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell my wife all the time. Our kid doesn't have to be that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can be a good part of that team and contribute. They can be the 5th guy on the tennis team. Doesn't have to be the number 1
Right.
A line
Yeah,
every time.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's my point to that is like, I get it that if you're trying to keep up with that kid, we say you can all go to the park and put 20 kids out there, and there's going to be 1 or 2 alpha males or a alpha female.
Yeah.
If that's even a word, I don't know.
The alpha female.
But there's always going to be that 1 or 2 that separate themselves from everybody. I see it. I coach my kids. I watch other teams play.
Yeah.
You pick those 1 or 2 out, and you're like, they're good.
Yeah.
But you have to have all these others
Yeah.
to make a
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
You might not be the star running back at your high school, but I can be a good receiver. I can play DB. I can be a lineman. Like there's all sorts of other things. And that's my argument to that is you don't have to be, if your 2 boys don't grow up to be 6'6", be this giant guy, it doesn't mean they can't play in high school tennis and be good at it. They might not be great, but be good.
Well, and also as parents, our goal is really for them to become the best version of themselves. And so I know as a lot of times as an employer, when I had my company, we love to hire the walk-ons. We love to hire that kid that wasn't a superstar. We love to hire the team manager because they
can grind.
Their journey. Yeah, they were grinders. They weren't naturally gifted, but they said, I have a goal that I want to play college, baseball. But I wasn't. They weren't maybe the most gifted, but they grinded, and maybe in their senior year they got a chance to compete a little bit. And so that right there was attractive as an employer. That's the type of person I want on my team. They know how to be a teammate. They know how to not be the superstar. They know how to be a great worker and grinder. So
I think we recognize it's complicated and different sports require different things. But I think in principle, what we're trying to convey is that playing multiple sports is a healthier route.
Yeah.
And it's a better route in most cases, even to help you athletically, cross train and all those types of things. But at some point, in some kids, there becomes a time when you have to go all in.
Yeah.
We just want the parents to understand the risk and rewards and all that kind of stuff.
And one last thing we didn't quite touch on, and I spoke to USTA, the tennis thing about how the system is the late bloomer, right? And so, my genes were set so that I would probably go to medical school, get good grades, not go to homecoming. Not my fault completely. I asked 3 or 4 girls. A little late on, and then end up being. But then I was
they're
trying
regretting
to
it now.
Yeah, right. They are. You know where you are. You know where you are.
if you're a listener, you're regretting it.
Could have had me. Yeah. And then, HBO Real Sports, you had your chance.
Exactly.
But, I actually, tried to walk on my coach actually walked down to a Big Ten school and play tennis there. And I was that kid. And actually some of the tennis kids, I say, look, just because you didn't play tennis, in college doesn't mean you failed or anything like that. Right. And actually, I know I'm, 50 and over playing Division I college tennis players and beating them in matches now at 51 and still competing. And I love it. And I'd probably do more in tennis than most every one of my friends who ever played college tennis. So you don't know what your path is going to be. And if you exit it, it's, you still have a path. It doesn't mean that.
It doesn't mean so.
It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean.
And I like
over.
what you said, like playing multiple sports. It doesn't even mean you have to sign up for a basketball league, like you said, and pay $300.
Right.
Everybody's, at least every 3-4 houses, there's a hoop out there. Go play.
Free play is free.
I love
How much
that.
does it cost?
I'm telling you, I love the free play idea. It's very good.
Yeah. I'll have to. We'll maybe one day as this girl, I'll have when we get mature, I'll have my wife. I'll ask her to come on to talk about pickup sports.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because
that'd be awesome.
It's about free play.
Love to have you both on.
Well, we can't thank you enough, man.
Yeah, this is fun. It's great what you guys are doing, and I appreciate it. And we're gonna have to do more. I'm actually on a mission not to just educate medical community, but it's parents, coaches, and the millions, actually not just thousands, millions of people out there who could use this.
Well, we'd like to partner with you in that.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'd love to
Yeah.
have you on
Yeah.
again at
Yeah.
some point. And
Yeah.
just appreciate everything.
Yeah.
You've impacted my family a lot,
Wow.
and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you
Thanks,
for having
Dr.
me
J.
on.
The real Dr. J.
That's right.
Hey guys, Jeff Francoeur here. Thanks for checking out Pure Athlete, and subscribe to our channel on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you go to listen to our podcast.